Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for New York proposed regulations for cannabis licenses and GMP requirements. Today, we're joined by Jenna Rumpel of CLE and Tyler Williams from CSQ. I'm just going to give them both a moment to introduce themselves and let you know about their experience. Then we'll hop right into some questions. We'll start with Jenna this afternoon.
Hi, thanks, Marie. Yes, so my official background is I am a certificated paralegal, and I was working with a law firm that handled a lot of criminal defense cases, particularly for drug crimes and marijuana-related crimes. We transitioned into licensing when it went legal recreationally here in the state of California, and I've been doing licensing and compliance ever since. And now for CLE, so essentially I help clients navigate through the licensure process with their application and working with the regulatory agencies. And then after licensure, help them with compliance matters in terms of what they can and cannot do with their license. So I've been doing it ever since, and I'm very happy to continue doing it with CLE now.
Perfect. Thanks, Jenna. I'm Tyler Williams. I'm the Chief Technical Officer for Cannabis Safety and Quality, or CSQ. My background is in product safety and quality. I've been doing that for the past 7 years, mostly in the food and beverage, dietary supplement, and most recently the cannabis industry for the past 5 years. I am a licensed GMP auditor. We also are a parent company that performs most of the GMP audits in New York for these conditional licenses and for the hemp operators as well. So we are an approved certification body in the state of New York as well. So glad to be here and talk about GMPs.
Excellent. And thank you both for taking the time. I know you're both very busy with a lot of new applicants that are coming on board. So we very much appreciate your time. So let's hop right into some questions. I'm going to start with, one for Jenna. And again, these are, I know, loaded questions, so take the time that you need to answer them. But always one of the most popular questions is, how long does it take to get a license in New York? And what is the process?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, it's going to depend on the activity that you're applying for. I think a lot of people are interested in retail, of course, in terms of this webinar, of course. I believe the board kind of unofficial timeline is they want to be able to process applications within 30 days once they become available. That will, bearing in mind, of course, if your application is complete and fulfills all the requirements. And if you need to provide any additional information. So that is their kind of goal that they want to hit, I believe, but there's no official time for them to fully process those applications. The retail licenses, we're hoping now that the regulations have been released, I'd say probably within the next first half of next year, some people will be able to begin applying for those retail licenses.
And what are the maybe top 3 things that they would need to know about the process to prepare to actually get that license together and submit it?
Yeah, absolutely. So New York has their tier process, so they really want to prevent, monopolization of the market of a few for retail particularly. So they are going to ask for disclosure of all your true parties of interest, anyone that's having any equity, any ownership, even down to your spouses. So they to prevent, like I said, the monopolization. So you're going to have all of your financial records and your for larger businesses, particularly kind of the breakdown of all entities of ownership down to the very last single person. So you're really going to have those taken care of. A very important thing, of course, is your location. For this initial round of card licenses, you're just the state is providing the location. For general applicants, you will need to secure that location yourself. So you'll need to know the zoning requirements and the location restrictions for dispensaries. Working with your local municipality and people is very crucial. I'd say another third point that is very crucial to get started is financial planning as well. Making sure you have the capital and funding to actually move forward and start your business. In New York, it's going to be very competitive, so you can survive in the market. So I'd say those are kind of the top three things to consider.
Okay. Now, one for Tyler. What are the GMP requirements that are proposed for New York dispensary licenses? And will New York licenses be available for non-social equity applicants in 2023?
Just specifically on the GMP requirements, it's more so for the producers and the cultivators, and not the dispensaries. As far as the dispensaries go, it's kind of your responsibility as a dispensary or retail owner to make sure that those products that you are purchasing are compliant with the state regulations and manufacturing under good manufacturing practices. So as far as retailers go, that's your responsibility. For producers, however, you do have to obtain a certificate. I believe it's within 6 months of receiving that conditional license, and prove that you are GMP certified. So with that, the state has a select few of accredited, what we call certification bodies that are allowed to perform these types of audits, these GMP audits. And therefore, you need to make sure that whoever you are using is also approved by the state.
Excellent. And I assume that is available through the various government websites, the list of approved auditors?
Correct. I believe right now it is only on the hemp side. However, I think that will translate over to adult use when time comes. So if you look at the cannabinoid or the hemp portal, you will be able to see approved GMP auditing companies, and those companies should know what standards are approved within the state.
Beautiful. All right. So, this could actually be addressed by either of you. So maybe Tyler, I'll have you kind of pop in your 2 cents, and then Jenna, if you want to add to it, that would be great as well. What are the latest New York regulatory record-keeping requirements? And we know that seed to sale is going to kind of affect everyone throughout the industry. So.
Yeah, I'll actually defer that to Jenna. She probably knows the record-keeping requirements a little bit better than I do.
Yeah, absolutely. So, of course, the record-keeping requirements, they really want to know the movement of cannabis, from seed to sale. You have to have all your financial records in place, all sales transactions, employee payroll transactions, tax accountings, inventory records, really from beginning to end. There has been some criticism from the regulations that they don't include some specific track and trace requirements. So it would kind of provide an opening for out-of-state providers to provide their into New York without having any accountability of that. So there's been some criticism brought forward from it. That in the public comments, so we'll see how they address that. But really, that's the main points that I would say for the record keeping requirements for your business.
Okay.
And if I could just add to that, just from a
Please do.
GMP standpoint, there are record keeping requirements within your GMP certification as well. So those are going to vary depending on who you're using and what GMP certificate or audit you are obtaining. And so just keep that in mind. So not only do you have to follow the state's requirements, but if you are getting certified to GMP, then you have to follow those requirements as well.
Now, we do know that a lot of people entering into the cannabis industry is their first time working within a regulated industry. So if someone is preparing themselves for a GMP audit, what are your key recommendations for them?
Yeah, I think the first step is to hire somebody competent within your organization. So somebody that has experience with GMPs. If you don't have somebody on your team already, this could be done by utilizing industries that we consider comparable to the cannabis industry. So things like food and bev, dietary supplements, pharmaceuticals. All of these industries, they have GMP requirements, and although they're different slightly from industry to industry, those skills translate nicely to the cannabis industry. So it's better to have somebody with at least a little bit of experience on your team to help you roll out this new program. If you're unable to get somebody on your team, there's a slew of consulting companies. GMPs are not new. Like I said, they've been in heavily regulated industries for a very long time, such as food and bev, dietary supplements, and pharma. And so there's a slew of consulting companies. Our parent company, ASI, for example, has a branch for consulting. And so therefore there's resources out there for you to help build the to get certified to a GMP audit. However, you just need to do your due diligence on selecting the right consulting company, the right partner, to make sure that one, you are getting a product that will get you through the certification process, and two, that is not overbearing on your process, especially if you're one of these micro businesses coming into the market, right? We don't want to set the requirements too high and write SOPs that are unrealistic and unattainable for that facility. So we need to make sure that it's calibrated to exactly what you're doing at your facility.
And actually, as a bit of a follow-up question, talking about the GMP and hemp farmers, they're kind of approved. I've got a question from Thomas McCormick, who wonders, besides hemp growers that were given that initial cultivation license, have any other cultivation licenses been issued? And then my follow-up question to Thomas is, if not, is there a timeline as to when we're expected to see more cultivators coming online?
I do not know. I don't know. I don't know if Jenna knows or if anybody knows at this point in time the timeline for that, unfortunately. So I'll let Jenna speak if maybe she has more knowledge than I do.
Yeah, so they have issued some conditional cultivator licenses. I don't have the specific number. I believe it's either 75 or over 100. They have processors is the same, so they have one of those mixed up. It's around one of them is about 75 and the other over 100 for cultivators and processors. So they have some of those conditional licenses approved so far, so that they can have some product available for retail stores, which they're still hoping for the end of the year to open.
All right, and we have a question from Benjamin Landaverde. I hope I said your last name, Benjamin. What cities have approved cannabis in the state of New York? I know that's, again, another loaded question, but have there any who've made large announcements in regards to their stance on this rollout?
So how New York created it was that the cities had an opportunity to opt out of having retail and consumption licenses in their area And that deadline was last year, December in 2021. So if they did not submit that opt-out request, then they weren't allowed to prevent cannabis retail licenses from being in their jurisdiction. And I believe that for other activities, that they aren't allowed to prohibit licenses being there as well. They are also jurisdictions can't impose any additional special fees to deter the applicants from being in their jurisdiction. When applicants are ready to begin their application, they are to notify the local municipality no earlier than 30 days before they submit their application, just to try and prevent a flooding of calls and interest in reaching out to them, trying to prevent a flood of that to the local municipalities.
That is fair. Now, a bit of a follow-up question to that, because that was similar to how it rolled out up here in Ontario, just north of New York. Communities were given the opportunity, if you'd said yes, you weren't allowed to change your mind. But if you'd said no, they could in future reverse that decision and say, yes, we now are comfortable with this. We've seen what it's done in other cities and we can see it be a benefit to us. Is that similar down in New York, where communities may have initially opted for no, but we may see them change their minds kind of throughout the rollout of all this?
Yeah, I believe they do have that opportunity to change their mind in the future. I know similar things happened here in California, where a lot of jurisdictions impose temporary bans just to see how the market develops, see how taxes were generated, revenues for the cities, and comparing them before they wanted to consider it for their jurisdiction. A few years on, many more jurisdictions opened up. They relieved the temporary ban, seeing how beneficial it was to the community, seeing that some of the stigmas in terms of security risk and potential, abuse or by attraction to teens or youth or whatnot. Excuse me. They saw that it wasn't what they feared, I guess is the right thing to say. And so they kind of released those bans. And I think in New York, we'll see more jurisdictions once it develops. They'll want to have some dispensaries in their area that opted out.
Nice. Okay, and Tyler, from a GMP standpoint, on the cultivation side, have they made any announcements in terms of like vertical integration or cultivators being allowed to have something like a farm gate store? And is there a process for that transfer of inventory from one to the other that's been proposed? I know that's a loaded question, but
I haven't seen anything. Most of my conversations with the department are around safety and quality. So from a GMP perspective, it's more of GAPs, which is good agricultural practices. So that's what we're looking for there. I'm not solely sure on if they're going to allow vertical integration or further for those licenses.
Okay. And okay, if you've been kind of what does the government seem to be most concerned of when it comes to safety and quality?
There are several things. I think the two riskiest products that cannabis producers can make is raw flower and edibles. Edibles being the most risky because there's a lot of variables that happen in edible processing, a lot of different things that can go wrong, and just like with food and bev. And so we're looking for things like pathogens, mold, bacteria, all of that stuff, making sure that we're eliminating those risks. Too many states rely solely on finished product testing and not preventative controls, such as GMPs. And the reasoning why New York went this direction was to make sure that we're not just relying on finished product testing. What I mean by that is if we create 1,000 units and we test 5 or 10 of those units, all we're doing is guaranteeing that those 5 or 10 units are safe. However, if we combine finished product testing with preventative controls, there's a lot less risk there, right? So now we know that we have implemented these preventive controls throughout our process. We have guarantees that these products were made under safe and wholesome conditions. Therefore, when we're doing our finished product testing, we're just verifying our processes instead of just saying that these 5 or 10 products are safe.
Excellent. It's a great way to combat that legacy market and create that trust in these products that are going to be coming to New York for the first time. So, think if anybody has any questions, please feel free to put them into the chat today. We were focused largely on that dispensary portion, but if there's cultivators out there or potential cultivators, please feel free to enter your questions in here for Tyler as well, so that you can use his brain to the maximum this afternoon. All right, so with the dispensaries, I know safety and security for employees is definitely a concern, both for employees, business owners, insurance companies. Are there any regulations that have been posted up about how stores are to be built out to provide an extra layer of security for both consumers and employees and the inventory? Sorry, this one's for you, Jenna.
That is a good question. Generally, I can definitely provide specific details for New York for anyone who's interested, but yes, there's a number of requirements that dispensaries should definitely take into consideration in terms of alarm systems, security surveillance systems, locking up your inventory in a secured area, so that only accessed by specific authorized persons in their operations can get into them. If you have securing windows and any areas that may be exposed to potential break-in, you want to keep those secured up, and of course having a security team. So guards, I have to double check in terms of armed guards would be allowed. A lot of dispensaries do have armed guards in place, but you'll definitely need that security team on site during all business hours to protect from theft and break-ins. I'd say internally as well, diversion. You want to have a set of policies and procedures in place to track the movement of your personal inventory, so that the employees or whatnot can't divert that product as well. So you'll want to have those policies in place just internally for your internal protection.
Yeah, anything that could affect your bottom dollar, protecting it is a good idea. Okay, so I have a question from Shaheen Kazai. I really hope I said your name right. If I don't, feel free to yell at me in the chat. And they would like to know what the licensing fees are. So maybe we'll start at dispensary and work our way up to the other categories.
Yes, so all the licensing fees are going to vary depending on your activity. Most are, so for retail, your application fee and the regulations is $1,000, and then the license fee is $7,000. Cultivation is going to vary based on what you're doing. So if it's indoor, outdoor, mixed light, and the tier category that you're going to be producing based off of your square footage. So those can go up to 10, 20, 50,000 plus dollars for license application fees. And then they included an additional kind of cap for like $250 per square foot kind of thing. So there's the fee and then the additional dollar figure for your per square footage. So for cultivation, there's a number of activities. So I'm more than willing to provide that breakdown to people in an email. I can absolutely do that. But they will, those fees will vary based off of your activity.
Excellent. So if anybody is looking for those specifics on their plan, please feel free to email info@Cannabis License Experts, and we'll make sure that our team gets back to you with the appropriate information. If it's not Jenna, I have a feeling she's going to be quite busy after this afternoon, but we have an amazing team of people equally as talented as Jenna as well. And then your GMP questions, Tyler, reach out to Tyler. Or if you want to send them through to us, we will direct them appropriately. Okay, so we have a next question. We've got no Michaels today. Everybody's challenging me on pronunciations, but I want to make sure I say this right. I'm going to guess Janelle Alexander, and they're wondering when the next group of applicants will be accepted.
I don't see anything specific yet, but I would expect that within the first half of next year, that's kind of my expectation, is that they'll start rolling out additional applications. So I'd say that's my best guess. I don't know if Tyler has any kind of insight on what his expectations are, but I would say within the first half of next year, we'll start seeing some movement.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Most of I know the department is focusing on getting those conditional licenses together and making sure that they're doing those inspections on those facilities right now. So that sounds about right to me.
Excellent. And April had a great follow-up question to this. Going forward, will they continue to use the same grading system to distribute retail licenses, or are we expecting to see some changes?
That is a good question. I thought about this as well. From what I can see is that it's not going to be, for these card licenses, it was a scoring criteria, and it was reserved for, justice involved individuals, and you had to, win the license essentially. It was merit-based. Going forward, they really want an expansion of the market and haven't imposed any license caps so far as I can see, other than, but based on population, so not oversaturate specific areas. So I imagine it will be your application is complete and meets all of the requirements. If it is a scoring criteria, you might just have to, your application will need to receive a score in order to earn that fully complete package. But I don't anticipate it at this time to be a scored kind of merit-based application, only reserved for a few people.
Okay, thank you. And Tyler, Amanda Bass would like to know if they will continue to use BioTrack or a different software for seed-to-sale traceability, or if there's been any discussions on that at this point.
I haven't heard anything of them using something different. I don't imagine they're going to change just because the medical market and the the anticipated hemp market will be using those or those hemp conditional licenses that are transferring over, and will be using that. So I think they're going to continue using BioTrack, but we'll see.
Excellent. And this is kind of to both of you. When it comes to POS at the dispensary level, have they kind of set out a particular software, or are there requirements that software has to meet in order to be considered compliant?
I would say generally applicants can pick the point of sale system that they would like to use, so long as it is compliant, it works with the track and trace program. So as long as the company that you're going with can be integrated with track and trace, then point of sale is usually typically up to you.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. I haven't seen any states, at least to my knowledge, that limits what POS system you use. As long as it functions and interacts with the seed-to-sale system, you're kind of open to choose whichever system you like and whatever fits your company.
Excellent. Do some of those have kind of an SOP basis behind them that can be used to support your operations? Or Is it kind of like you pick your software, then you're creating your own kind of internal SOP and compliance kind of training involved in rolling that out within your operation?
I think it's both. I think good companies will have SOPs on hand, ready to go, and be able to share those as a resource with their clients. However, that's not going to be the case with every software company you choose or POS system that you choose. So I think it's and to be fair, the companies that do provide SOPs, they're bluntly speaking, they're probably not the best. So you need to make sure that it is tailored to your operation and to what you're actually doing at that retail location, because it's probably going to be pretty generic when it's coming from them as a free resource.
Okay, so best used as a learning tool to develop your own processes.
Yep.
Okay, excellent advice. Now, this is just kind of a little bit more of a fun question. I'm going to direct it to Tyler first and then Jenna. What do you think is the most exciting kind of rollout or rumor that we are hearing that pertains to GMP, quality, safety, within the New York State?
For me, I think it's just having the requirements in place. There's only 4 states right now that require third-party certification, and that's one of those being New York, Florida, Michigan, and Maryland. Missouri, my home state, is looking at doing something very similar. So we're starting to see this happen more often. And the reason being is because regulators have a lot to do. They're coming from, the Department of Health or other within other organizations within those state departments, and they may not have experience in cannabis or going out and seeing cannabis facilities. So this allows experts to go into your facility, to review your processes, to give you guys real feedback on how to, produce more consistent products, to produce safer products and higher quality products, which in a lot of states it's not mandatory. And so you see a lot of what we call MSOs or multi-state operators doing it, but not so much the small guys. So I think that's what I'm most excited for is getting these small kind of craft operators learning these best practices and getting ahead of the game, to where in an industry where it's been led by MSOs for so long, that I think this is a way for them to compete with the big dogs, for lack of better terms.
Okay. And Jenna, what are you most excited to see in this new proposed regulations?
Yeah, I think that New York has given the regulations a lot of thought into the requirements and what they care about in terms of the industry, and trying to make it better as well. Seeing if they can, taking on what other states have done and seeing how they can improve on it. A couple of things that are big for them, of course, is environmental sustainability and making sure that all their licensees are taking that into consideration, because of course we know, particularly for cultivation, that requires a substantial amount of energy, and the state will require for you to, I believe it's submit monthly reports in terms of your energy consumption, and finding ways to reduce your impact. I want to agree with Tyler as well. I think the craft kind of brewery model is going to be something very exciting. It's under the micro business license. It's kind of the only option available for a vertical integration where you can grow your own product and also sell your own product. So I think that will be something that's really exciting to see as the industry develops for these kind of craft operators.
Excellent. Sorry, I'm just waiting for my mute to come off there. Am I back on sound?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Now, when it comes to safety and quality, we're hearing a lot at various other states about Delta 9, Delta 8. I know it's a hot button topic. Is there any kind of, aside from THC and CBD content, are there any testing requirements that are going to have to be listed on packaging?
So yes, for packaging, you will have to list your full kind of cannabinoid and terpene profile. So that will include, for Delta 8, I would have to look into that honestly a little bit further. But for packaging and labeling requirements, you will have to have that full profile from when it's tested for a breakdown of the cannabinoids, the THC amounts, Delta 9, Delta 8 breakdown. They will have to be included on there.
And just to add to that, once again, within your GMP certificate or whatever audit that is equivalent to that you're obtaining in the state, those are part of those requirements as well. If particularly if you're going above and beyond GMP and getting, let's say, a CSQ certificate, there is a whole section on fraud, which is kind of where Delta 8 falls into. And not that Delta 8 is unsafe or harmful if you consume it, as long as it's made in under safe conditions. However, there is if you're marketing this product as a natural THC product or as Delta 9 or whatever, there you are lying to the consumer if that in fact is a Delta 8 and it is made synthetically and things like that. So once again, it may not be specifically called out in the regulations. However, we are looking at those things.
Excellent. I like having to have the terpene profile in there. I think that's going to make more educated consumers as well. Just having watched the rollout here over the last 5 years, what I find is distributors are kind of pushing the THC story without necessarily listening to consumers and knowing that they've evolved beyond that conversation in the last few years. So I'm excited to see what New York is rolling out and how we can apply those changes up here potentially. It'd be nice. A little consistency across the border. If anybody has any questions, please pop them into the chat just to keep the conversation going. I don't want to take over and just kind of ask all my own interests here. But let me think, in terms of GMP, outside of obviously your nutrients and your fertilizers, what other things could potentially interfere with the quality of your plant?
So that would be more GAPs, good agricultural practices. So the biggest thing would be for environmentals. So, temperature and humidity controls, and this is mainly to prevent mold growth. Obviously, other things include pests and the different chemicals that you're using. So we call those agricultural inputs, whether that is your fertilizer, your nutrients, your pesticides, which I think at this point, most people are going for the more organic, even if it's grown indoor. I know it's technically not organic. However, they're trying to use less pesticides or pesticides on the organic register and using things like beneficial insects. So all of these things could affect the health and well-being of your plants and the quality of it. And the big thing, for growers is, and especially for those businesses that are going to be vertically integrated, if you're having issues at the growing level, then that means you're having issues throughout the entire supply chain, because whether you're taking that on for further processing, for extraction, or for making edibles or dietary supplements and things like that, it's going to affect that entire supply chain. So very important to make sure that you have the appropriate controls in place and are following good agricultural practices.
Excellent. No, bit of a follow-up question is amongst growers and consumers, I hear a lot of discussion, positive and negative, about irradiation. Are there any regulations in New York around using irradiation for that final kind of cleanup of any potential biologics that may be left over?
Yeah, so there are safety concerns with that. I think most of those are negated, and these are very, very low levels of radiation that we're using. The type of technology that's being used in cannabis has been used in pharmaceutical industries, for example, forever. So bringing that technology over is not necessarily a bad thing. I think maybe where we could get a little bit more guidance from regulators is more from a consumer perspective and consumers' choices when they purchase products. You just kind of like in the food industry, where we have GMOs and non-GMOs. There's nothing wrong with genetically modified organisms in your food. Actually, probably 99% of the corn around the world is made up from GMOs. So it's completely safe. However, if you are a consumer, you should have that choice to either purchase those products or not. Although we don't want to scare consumers and say that radiation is bad, I still believe it should be a consumer's choice to either to know that that product has been used, as radiation has been used on that product, and whether or not they want to purchase it.
Perfect. Transparency and education. I don't see anybody having a problem with that. Unless you're doing something you don't want to be transparent about, and then do we want to buy your product anyways? Okay, so I have another great question from Amanda here. What do you think most applicants gloss over that there should be more focus in the application process and facility build out? I'm going to start with Tyler on the quality side, and then Jenna, if you want to pop in terms of having worked with so many applicants and where you kind of want to pull your hair out with almost all of them.
I think everybody knows what I'm going to say. It's safety and quality. It's normally one of the smaller parts of an application. I think this is a huge focus for New York, so it is very important that you build that into your application and show that you have a pathway to get GMP certified. If you're on the retail side, what are you going to do to make sure that the products that you are purchasing from producers are compliant and they follow those same practices? So that for me is always my biggest concern, and what I try to educate people on in the application process and help support.
And Jenna?
Yeah, it is a great question. Of course, I think a huge factor I would say that I think applicants can take some more consideration on is financial planning in terms of after licensure. So to be in this business, you do need kind of a strong sense of patience and tenacity to see it through. It takes a while to get your approvals, and it can be very costly and expensive with licensing fees, build out fees, to get the building up to security and safety and building standards. And as a retailer, then you have to procure your inventory, which isn't always cheap as well. That's a cost. And I have seen some clients kind of really kind of crash and burn because it is even for new markets, it's still a competitive market. So you really need to have marketing strategies, advertising strategies to get customers and consumers and get a client base. So I'd say having a team, a knowledgeable team in all areas that of their expertise, from real estate, for example, to helping you find a location that is compliant, to consultants to help you with applications, and safety and security professionals and accounting professionals that are knowledgeable of the cannabis industry and of the regulations is crucial. But I'd say this is the hard part. The application is the hard part, of course. But I think sometimes people don't put as much thought as they should into what happens next, which is the actual running and operating of the business.
I could definitely agree with that. The number of people who are like, I don't need a business plan. It's fine. I'm going to grow weed. I'm going to be a billionaire. Yeah, we definitely know that is not how the industry is shaking out in any demographic or any region. So I appreciate both of your input in that regard. Now, have they talked at all about advertising rules and regulations and marketing rules and regulations for New York State specifically? Or are we still kind of waiting on some guidance there?
I believe we still need some official guidance there, but they have released some information. Of course, the main things that cannabis businesses need to be concerned with, and pretty much in every state, is that they want to prevent you trying to reaching out to any person who's underage, so under 21, trying to prevent that exposure to them in terms of where you're advertising. Can you advertise on a billboard, for example? I have to check for New York, but I'm sure that that's something that they will consider, having those advertising models there. In terms of, like edibles or products, they don't want them to be looking, like any kind of candy that might be an attraction to children, or, any type of marketing material that could, attract anyone under 21. But we will see some official guidelines.
Guidelines on that. Okay. For what I've noticed, and I could be completely wrong because I don't spend a lot of time talking to our New York potential customer base and inquiries, but a lot of that seems to be kind of aligning along the lines of what Health Canada rolled out in terms of can't be appealing to youth, can't like come up with flavors that aren't bubblegum, that type of thing, which makes it a little easier to direct it away from the interest of children. So like, no, what do I want hibiscus flowered juice for, or something along those lines. Now, are we seeing anybody really coming out ahead in terms of really having their QA safety and efficacy programs in place? Like, has anybody really hit the ground running and come up kind of as a leader in that regard, that maybe setting a standard for other people to come up against, whether that's a consultant agency or just guidance that's coming from maybe a journalist who's writing some really in-depth information out there that you found really helpful or really insightful?
Yeah, I mean, oh, go ahead, Jenna.
Oh, no, go ahead.
My organization CSQ, that's exactly what we do. We are standard developers for the cannabis industry, and so we have several. Once again, a lot of it's big MSOs because they're operating in multiple states under multiple regulations, and our standard kind of goes above and beyond what you see in most states, right? So this gives them a baseline across multiple states to standardize their business, and also it makes for a QA person who's coming in these companies, a lot of them are coming from the food industry, a lot of them are coming from pharmaceuticals. So they're used to these types of certification, these types of standards. And so it's familiar, and it creates standardization in the organization, and it creates safer and more wholesome products for everybody. So there are a couple leaders out there, I would say, but most of them are the big MSOs, which I'm sure a lot of people in here are more on the micro side. But it doesn't mean you can't follow their example. For us specifically, we do not charge for our standards. You can download them from the website. You do not have to get certified to be following the best practices that you should be following as a business anyway. So that's kind of our motto and what we want to do, and help educate and provide resources for these businesses, no matter if you're the small mom and pop operation or you're a huge MSO in 20 something states.
And you know what? I'll be downloading it at 3 o'clock this afternoon. No, that's a really amazing resource that you guys provide to people. Twofold. One, just budgets are tight in the cannabis industry, and helping people kind of align themselves initially. And then as well, that just adds integrity to the work that you do. Hey, we're so good, we'll give you this part. And just let you run with it. And I know a lot of the micros are going to really appreciate the organizations that are kind of there to support the industry as a whole, and not just their own organization. So I appreciate that. Now, anybody else have any questions for the group today? I'm just going to end up with more of my boring questions. Okay. Has anybody expressed any concern, or has there been any concerns that you've heard raised, just even amongst kind of your own network of people, about proximity to the Canadian border and what risk that might lead to for consumers or for businesses? I know when Canada came online at the federal level, there was a lot of concern about travel into the US, which seems to have just gone away in the last couple of years, which is awesome. But is there any concerns that are being expressed for Americans who are thinking about international travel if they're involved with with cannabis organizations?
You mean traveling with product, taking on a plane?
Oh, not with product. Just in terms of like an association with a cannabis company. I know initially there was a lot of concern about that up here in Canada, which seems to have gone away as more and more states come online. There's less concern about traveling and being associated with a cannabis company, but is there any concern about that being raised amongst Americans and international travel?
In terms of international companies being involved with companies here in the States, I haven't seen a lot that prohibits that. And in my kind of networking circle, don't really hear a lot of concern over it. Of course, where you are, your business owners and whatnot, you need to be U.S. citizens. But having international companies, or if you're a foreign, if your entity is a foreign-owned company, that needs to be disclosed and everything. But I haven't seen a lot of too much concern that would be, I guess, a problem for the industry over here.
Right. Excellent. Let's see. Oh, I think we have a new question. And that's going to... Brendan, that's a good question. How is waste at a cultivation and processing level going to be handled?
So yeah, it is a good question. So cannabis waste will need to be appropriately handled in terms of track and trace as well. So you need to make sure that it is kept separate and secure from any of your other products, cultivated products, so you can prevent contamination. Any waste that is handled, you need to work with an appropriate waste hauler to kind of tear it down and make sure that can't be usable again, and then you need to make sure that it is appropriately handled in your inventory and track and trace to account for that product as to once it's been wasted.
Yeah, and I believe the term they use is rendered unusable or undistinguishable or something along those lines. And there's several different ways that you can obtain that goal.
Right, excellent. And they haven't put in any stipulations as to like it must be done in one of these three ways. It's just if you can prove that it is rendered into a state that it can't be used for consumption methods, I guess. Give that to Tyler. They haven't said like, oh, it must be ground up and mixed with cat litter or anything along those lines.
I'm not sure, and I'm going off memory here. I don't know if they go into great detail. I think on the medical side they gave examples, but I'm not sure on adult use.
Okay. But maybe best practices for those who are kind of planning would be to follow the medical recommendations or the medical side recommendations for destruction.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Okay. And let's see. And Brendan has a follow-up question. How will returns be handled? So your guys' questions are better than mine.
So yes, that is a great question. So returns can be taken back to a dispensary based off of certain conditions, of course. If a recall has been imposed, then it's up to the dispensary to try and reach out to those, to provide communication out to the public so that they can get those products back that have been determined under a recall that might be unsafe, so that there's no harm that can be imposed. Any returns that are given back to the dispensary in their packaging, it will be entered into track and trace, and then those items will have to be put into the waste disposal system.
Sorry about that. My headphones just died, so if there was feedback, I apologize. That was 100% my fault. Okay, so just moving into the last 5 minutes of today's session. If anybody has any more great questions, like we've been seeing in the chat, please pose them, and we will make sure they're addressed. As well, if anybody has any specifics that they didn't want to put into the chat, please feel free to reach out to any of today's panelists, or just reach through to the email there at info@Cannabis License Experts, and we'll direct that on to the correct people. Closing thoughts. Tyler, what are your closing thoughts and major takeaways from today that you think people should keep forefront of mind?
Yeah, I think the major takeaways is New York is like Jenna said, is really put a lot of thought into this. I believe the public comment period is over. Is that correct, Jenna? It's over.
It's still going on right now.
Going on.
So 60 days.
So I do recommend everyone, whether you've already applied or looking at applying for whatever different type of license, to give your comments and your feedback, because I will say the regulators do listen. And New York is been a great state to work with. I know as far as my side goes in my field and safety and quality, they've been a great partner for us. And so I think, it is important to get your voice and your concerns and your questions answered. So please go and respond to that public comment period, because you are going to help shape this new market. And I think we all know New York is going to be a major market for the cannabis industry.
Yeah, I would agree. Listening to the control board when they have their meetings, you can feel the sensation that they're all very excited for the industry. And I can say from experience with other industry and other jurisdictions, they don't seem to have that, to match that kind of level of enthusiasm and excitement, and just kind of looking ahead and to build this, trying to make this like the number one market for cannabis, and hopefully be a model for other places to follow as well. So it's nice to see. It gets me excited to see for it to develop. And I would agree, if you have questions or concerns about the regulations, to definitely reach out to them during this comment period, because they will take it into consideration. They really have given these regulations a lot of thought, and they want to make sure that they're, support everyone in the best way from the consumer side, and for the industry side as well, for the operators. It's exciting to look forward.
Sorry, I'm just waiting for my mic to unmute here. Sorry, my mic's playing silly with me right now. But are either of you aware of public discussions on the potential for electrical power availability issues, and whether power companies have offered up any solutions or warnings? It's a great question. Let's start with Jenna, and then we'll have Tyler chime in as well if he has any comments.
Yeah, it is a great question. I know, particularly for cultivation, power is a major concern. Most of the time, you do need to get a power upgrade so that you can, for indoor specifically, that you can support your power needs to actually cultivate. Just an example, I know in Los Angeles, it's a huge issue. People have been waiting for like 3 years to get their power upgrades, and still hasn't happened. In New York, I would need to look into it further, but I would, if it's not a discussion that they're having now, know that it's going to be, I'm sure there's going to be companies out there that are going to be trying to offer solutions as he's suggesting. But yeah, it is an area of concern.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think it's going to depend on where you're at in the state, right? And how big of a concern that is. But Thomas, once again, I suggest that is a great concern to raise during the public comment period. So I would suggest making note of that. And if it's not on regulators' minds, it should be.
Perfect. Thank you for that last question there, Thomas. That was a very relevant one to be asking today's conversations. I do know that it's been a very busy week for everyone, and I know that everyone still has to get back to work this afternoon. So I wanted to thank both Jenna and Tyler for providing such great insights today. Oh, I'm going to try and squeeze in one more question if you guys are okay with this. Let's see. Oh, it's more of a comment. That's okay. All right. So I'll go back to thanking you both for your time and your energy and for sharing your very valuable insights into what we're expecting to see coming up in New York over the next little bit. I want to thank all of our attendees for being here today and hearing and participating in this conversation. They are very important conversations. And I'm going to reiterate what both Jenna and Tyler have said is get involved. It's key that regulators hear from everyone and have your input in their decision-making process as well. It can make huge changes to how they perceive and roll out these programs. So if anyone has any questions, any concerns, any feedback, requires a quote, or would like to be in touch with any of the panelists today, please feel free to email info@cannabislicenseexperts.com, and we will have one of the experts get in touch with you. So thank you again for all your time, your energy, and for joining us today. Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.